Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Sad. They've they end of lifed my snap cam that I used to have filters on. So
Oh, tragic. The one with like the quick hat and
the
everything that you
fake
would
quick
do.
hat, yeah. So I'm too scared to put the real thing on now. So I should have tidied up my office beforehand.
Good.
Meet echo feature request for blurred backgrounds, please.
Right. I mean, because I think like I can like add a blur on my own, like this. But that's like my local camera. Go blurry. Why not? And we have David.
All right. Does this work? Can you hear me?
I can't see any like EDM flashing lights, so it doesn't seem to be working.
Well, I just got back from a Burning Man event, so they're not very far, actually.
Okay, good.
Hold on. Here. Need to make it a bit darker in here. There we go.
It gets the right mood, at least. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's out of frame. All right.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah, it saturates anyway.
So we can give a couple more minutes for people to join in. Thank you, Lucas, for updating the draft recently. I saw we also have some activity on the issues. I just filed one personally. I think as far as stuff we should talk through today, it'd be good to cover if people have been able to read and review and just have overall thoughts on the document. Let's hear those. We can also spend some time going through the issues, and Lucas, I know you filed some, so hopefully those can be good discussion points, and maybe we can get some direction and clarification there. And then also, I think it'd be good to talk a little bit about just like the process bit of like this technically isn't like an IB stream adopted thing. Do we want to do that on this version or another future version or what? That is up to us. We can see if other folks will be tagging along. Lucas, was did you want to start with any of the issues you had? Any?
So I'll just quantify. Yeah, I created like 3 just before the meeting, which I meant to do earlier today, but time. But those they weren't like, oh, we really should discuss them right now because they're of most priority for this meeting, but they were just relevant things. For example, the points that when we last had an in-person meeting, Cullen raised, and just some examples. I think the material is swayed by my experiences, and those don't represent everyone's. So they're very quick or TLS focused, and it would be great to have more rounded things. So Cullen's has some good examples. We can probably digest them, prepare some text. But yeah, it'd be great if Cullen could do that himself. But we will try to do that. And get some reviews and whatever for the next draft, probably. I don't know if anyone's been following the working group chairs list and the discussion there, which has been quite interesting in terms of reserved fields or bits for reserved fields. I just created a tracking issue because I think there is stuff there, but it's it's long, and I think what it's speaking to is the fact that there's no as much as we would want, there isn't a single answer of just do this. Like a lot of this is context dependent, and what is right for one protocol or the constituents who would implement and deploy that protocol is not necessarily correct for everyone. And so I haven't had the time to go through some of the citations and the RFCs that other people have brought up on that list of examples of text that says maybe, if you're going to have a reserved field that has no meaning for this version of the protocol, you should set it to 0, for example. And then what should the receiver do with that information? Should they ignore it? Must they ignore it? These kinds of discussions. And to me, that seemed really relevant to the kinds of topics we've had here. So I encourage people to come to the meeting this week. I don't know if the attendees here because of that. But if not, we can try and reflect some of that back into the draft, was my thought. I don't know what other people are thinking here.
I had not been following that particular thread, but yeah, thank you for calling that out and also having them link here. So reading, I can let me drop a link to that into the chat as well. We have a chat. Go. So I mean, it's essentially giving the difference between, do you have to set it to 0 on sending, and then you should ignore it on receipt, versus you should set it to 0 and must ignore on receipt, which is one of these classic nits. I happen to disagree with the original emailer, but what, Lucas, if you've been following that thread, can you summarize kind of where it ended up?
I think it ended up with a lot of activity while I was asleep, even today. So it's not like, oh, this was discussed years ago. It's a very active discussion, and I'll admit I haven't been able to keep up to where it's gotten to.
Okay.
But my take would be some of the protocols I'm familiar with would be a must send 0, must ignore. Sorry. And
must in both cases.
Yes. And I could kind of appreciate why that doesn't work for all protocols. So it's been an interesting learning activity from me. I don't think I'm necessarily the most informed right now to reflect that, but I'm happy to hold the pen and try and come up with some proposal that gives a fair treatment to the different views that are in that form. And that's not everyone. There are other people here. But to maybe come up with a PR that says something, but I can't do that right now on the spot, unfortunately.
So hi everybody. I'm not turning my video on because I'm on the sofa on my phone. But I also didn't follow the latest emails, just the beginning of the discussion, and I'm pretty sure because Martin Thompson spoke up or whatever. Maybe somebody pointed them already to this maintenance draft that we just recently published in this group, because I think that's much more relevant. I'm not sure if this squeezing document actually applies directly.
I mean, it's one of the relevant aspects, but I agree. I was going to mention 9413, and someone already did. So I was just like, hey, all the ideas have already been made in this thread. Now everyone's just repeating them. Unless there's been some interesting stuff today, because I haven't checked back in on it.
Yeah, and to be honest, again, I didn't read all the emails, but I don't understand where must doesn't work, because extensibility means that like you publish a new document and then you have to change that. But if you follow a certain RFC, a certain version of the protocol, then it must be this way.
Right. So of course, like the must not send doesn't mean that there won't be anyone who sends it, because they could be following a future RFC. And similar to like the must ignore is like, it's only if you only know this one and you haven't heard the other one.
And the purpose of that must is to ensure to prevent collisions, because conceptually, if you can do anything you want in another RFC. It just needs to update this one because of the must. And because it's doing that, you prevent a collision because you have like a locking mechanism in terms of RFCs that update this one. And that's why we need the musts. Otherwise you get collisions.
I think
So,
it's
you know,
more
okay.
discussion about what must and should means than about this
Yeah.
reserved fields.
I do.
No.
I tend to agree. Lars did raise the question. It wasn't actually Lars was responding to somebody else, I think, but about greasing came up in the discussion thread, and I think it depends on the size of the fields that we're talking about. If you're, in HB2, for example, there's like a reserved bit, which is always a value. I can't remember if it's 1 or 0, but greasing a bit is kind of a bit destructive, and it plays into the, if it is, say, a must and a must, are you trying to do positive, like active testing of explicitly ignoring the requirement in order to test if your peer is following its requirements, and whether that is something we should provide any discussion of. Again, I don't have a good answer. We do address some of this in the sense that already in the greasing section, we talk about reserving explicit values for the purpose of greasing, and the effects that different the different size bag of bits that you have different consequences on what you can do. And that text we have already seems fairly broad for the purposes that we put it in.
Yeah, I think, to Miriam's point earlier, the overall conversation about reserve, besides being about what must and should mean, is potentially more about like the protocol maintenance document. But there is definitely an intersection with reserved greasing values, and they are, as the document currently points out, they're special types of reserve values that like you definitely will send, and you definitely have to ignore. And so I think it's good that we have the labeling, like the talking about like maybe label them as reserved for greasing to make it distinct from other types of reserved. I wonder though, even like to the point of this conversation, like should we, or maybe that's enough, like give more explicit, like here's the text you should put in to your document, because if people are quibbling about how to do reserved correctly, just make it really clear. It's like here's the formula. But,
I think that was effectively the ask of the thread. If I was to channel the spirit of, is there somewhere that says exactly how to phrase this? And again, some people cited documents. I don't know if they address that question or not. But yeah, if there's, I think maybe to the point of greasing explicitly, it says there's these code points, but doesn't say how often you should use them. And then this is something we discussed on previous meetings. Should, for example, the Cloudflare quiche is will send H3 grease frames for the first request on every connection. It did that as part of the early interop that we did, and we just never turned it off. We could, but we don't. But there wasn't anything in the draft to say you have to use these grease values, or use them for some proportion, or use them unpredictably, because maybe people have got used to the fact that we always send it on the first request and wrote some special case code for that. I really hope they wouldn't. But we could add a lot of complexity to add variability of those things. I don't know if it's useful. And also, in discussions, this came up with a colleague earlier today, some of these things, if you are going to go a bit more active in those kinds of things, you need to be able to observe the effects of them. And I don't think the document really speaks to that yet in a good way. So if you are going to risk breaking something for good, is that an experiment? If you can't observe the effects, then it's probably maybe not safe. There are real consequences that could happen to people, and if we don't speak to that yet, to me that seems like the kind of thing we should do, and be more direct.
Yep. I'm going to file an issue for that.
Yeah,
right
I can do that, or do you want to do it?
I'm working on it right now.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, just +1 to that. I think that's actually a really important part of the document, or will be, hopefully.
To the point of cases where stuff can be broken, since I see we have Chris here and Lucas, you filed an issue around post-quantum TLS. I know there's the recent things that have gone poorly with some deployments of
Which things?
like what was it? Like the classic
Chrome.
like Palo Alto firewalls screwing up.
Oh, yeah.
quantum handshakes.
Yeah, Chrome ran into some issues.
Yeah,
There's an article. Let me see if I can find it.
So I wonder, like, is there something besides giving examples of for the document, like, is there something that we can learn from this of like could we have done something differently or better? And is that the protocol variability exercising that could have been done that wasn't done? Is that as opposed to classic greasing? What do we think?
And this, I was speaking with my colleague Bas Vasterben today. I was trying to get him to come on the meeting, but he was sadly unable to attend. But this is very much, his bag is post quantum as well, and they've been running experiments, etc. and stuff. And then the point he made, if he doesn't mind me channeling him, but it was effectively, it would be great if TLS clients randomly tried to have sent massive things in the past. But if they did this so randomly and unpredictably, and in such a small fraction compared to other things, even if they could measure some kinds of failures, they might be within the noise of other random internet failures. So like some of this becomes pretty like statistically minded very quickly. And I would say as an engineer, I hate statistics as much as I can, and don't necessarily think in terms of running large-scale experiments in such ways that to get enough confidence in these things. Sometimes even having those feedback mechanisms are very difficult as well. If you're a web browser, perhaps you do have telemetry. Obviously, we have some people here who work in privacy preserving metrics groups and care a lot about that. So there's a lot of signals you can take in a privacy preserving way, but other things are potentially not as well. But that, yeah, sometimes feedback mechanisms are literally things like angry mobs on social media saying, for a very specific set of network environments and equipment and other things, that something is not quite right, and trying to track that down. We have something called network error logging in the web, implemented by some browsers. And again, I know there's some efforts to try and make that a bit more private. That is sometimes a good signal, but something I've been trying to get over the last couple of years is stronger or better granularity of HTTP2 and HTTP3 error cases, because there's such a broad bucket. You might know something's gone wrong, but again, that could have been related to variability or to an experiment or to some rollout of some new feature, but it can be very, very difficult to tell. So people deploying this stuff can tend to implement their own metrics, but depending on the kinds of failure mode that there is, again, it is that kind of consideration. I think I would roll into some text on the importance of observability and maybe different considerations or strategies on those kinds of things.
So I guess specifically on, I guess there are different aspects here, but going back to just like the PQ TLS thing, and like the point of, yeah, you could have variability to just like randomly do stuff longer, and assuming that there is some reporting or detection of saying like, hey, when I am doing some greasing or variability intentionally, I'm going to be sensitive to reporting errors that correlate to that. if that were in place, would it have been an effective strategy to have, earlier on do larger, I guess, is it larger client hellos? Is that what needed to be done? Yeah, larger client hellos. And it's like, it's like hindsight is 2020. We can say like, yes, of course we could have done variability around larger client hellos, but like, would there be a good way to predict those, or just like, can you vary all the things? Like, is there a way to give recommendations to new things going forward? And like, I assume like Quick doesn't actually have this problem yet. That PQ Quick is fine.
Well, we had this problem in Quick, and we actually fixed it halfway through development. I remember I wrote that PR back in the day, and it was we called it was the Q test on there for post quantum, where you could now fit your client hello across multiple Quick packets. Earlier it had to fit in one, and then we would have been completely screwed.
Yeah. But as far as like ossification around Quick handshake, I assume we haven't seen that.
I wouldn't be surprised if there is, purely because, processing one packet is a lot easier than processing n packets.
So you mean more by like endpoints as opposed to by middle boxes?
Depending on what you define as middle box. So,
fair enough.
But to Lucas's point, I never implemented it in Chrome, but I'm willing to bet that if you split your client hello into two packets, you defeat most SNI extractors. Even if you put them in I was thinking if you put them in you split it into two long headers that you then put into the same UDP packet to get the same performance network-wise, you probably blow through that security box, no problem.
Until they get wise to it, right?
Yeah, but the amount of like single packet processing doesn't require you to keep state until a timeout, and so that's a huge performance hit for a box if you go from single packet to multi-packet.
Yeah, and I'm not even thinking, middle box inspection. I'm thinking more just something more like load balancing, right? Until for Quick, until the session is established and you have connection IDs that can do stateless routing, you want to ensure, say, all the initial packets on a new flow do go to the same endpoint server, say, that can direct them to the same place. And that sounds trivial, but depending on deployment architectures, it could be not. And again, you could get into weirdness. And we've seen a bit of this, again, to stretch the discussion slightly. Recently, I was speaking to some folks about MTU sizes in Quick, and what people pick for initial MTU sizes, and whether they have path MTU discovery and etc. And just trying to do, I did a little survey of Quick implementations, what they pick by default, whether they allow customization, etc. Not for the purposes of this meeting, but for general interest around the topic. And some people have implemented path MTU discovery. Some people will have it in their libraries, but don't enable it on their deployments. Facebook gave some examples where they tried to and found various real-world deployments. I don't think that's related to Greece, but if you're going to try and send whopping big things and I don't know, have something that is actually going to do IP fragmentation, even if you don't think it is, would you even know, say, if you're doing variation, or variability, if that was happening to you or not? So yeah, I think it's kind of visibility of the full stack. Maybe that was Gori's issue, or related to greasing at multiple layers, issue 6. It kind of feels maybe related to that.
Is Tommy greasing his video conferencing system?
I think someone's greasing my Wi-Fi connection. Came back. Sorry about that.
All good.
Yeah, what do we want to? So as like a higher level question for some of the older issues we have, like Corey's. It's not that old. It's just from the July meeting. How do we want to tackle approaching some of those? Because Lucas, you were very kindly authoring currently and doing all the work there. I know Dave had previously talked about joining. I don't know if you've chatted with him, but also like, do we want to assign topics to dig into?
Yeah, I haven't had the chance. I've been severely short cycles even since last summer. Dave kindly volunteered. I haven't had a chance to speak to him. I think that speaks maybe how busy we both are. So I did mean to reach out to him in preparation of updating the draft ahead of this meeting and just didn't get around to it. Like I say, I don't want to be the sole pen holder here. I'm happy to be like an editor and craft it and maintain the vision of the draft so it's coherent, etc. It would be nice to the sense I got for these issues is it's just more like aid memoirs, like, oh, I better not forget this. It's a question and I'm going to stick it there so we can come back to it, and no one's doing it. I would maybe suggest we end up assigning the issue to the person that raised it, because maybe they're the best person to answer their own thing, or at least we should look back and try and drain the queue and decide if it's something we're going to do or not. For sure.
I do think overall, like taking a pass at this, like the most obvious thing that needs to be expanded is just like coverage of other protocols and other layers, like you addressed before. So whether that is saying Corey and Dave and Cullen, like help us write stuff or review stuff, try to solicit that. For the discussion about like observability that you were getting to earlier, you mentioned like the network error logging stuff that browsers have, but I guess what practically do we think fits in the document other than like you should report or be able to observe the errors? Should we leave it at like the abstract level there and just talk about why it's important to do that and being able to kind of instrument while greasing, or should we talk about kind of how that actually ends up integrating into the protocol? Because I imagine like there are aspects where like certain failure modes are like easier to observe or not.
I'm very torn, to be honest, because if maybe one of the first meetings we had on this topic, we discussed an interop bug between Apple and Cloudflare's quick stacks, and like even in the last week, I found a kind of like a race condition in Google's quiche that is now fixed, and it was a one-line change, but it was if you sent a stop sending at a certain point in a sequence of interactions, then you would lose a stream credit. And on its own, maybe that's not so bad. Over the lifetime of some connection, that might be bad, and would result in a starvation and the connection ultimately not being able to make any forward progress and timing out. The observability, and I'm not saying
was that on the server side or the client side or both?
I tested it predominantly on the server side because
Like Google server or
Cloudflare,
oh
like example
oh
server.
key Cloudflare quiche. I see.
Yeah, I was able to take a very complicated test case of throwing a load of stuff at the wall and seeing what's stuck and seeing weird stuff in my logs, and keep iterating and actually drill that down into a very simple test case, which was great. But unless you were to keep propagating that kind of behavior, you wouldn't have seen that manifest in really any kind of error, other than, I don't know, I'm not receiving max stream frames, like I'm not receiving new window credits at any frequency. I think for real browsing use cases, for example, there's so much noise, so much different usage of streams. In this case, it relied on a stop sending. Those aren't used that often in web browsers. Should web browsers randomly send stop sending and cause their responses to be reset? Probably not, unless they're willing to sacrifice things. But sacrificial requests would have an impact on server logs. And there was a case this week or in the last few weeks where S3 buckets were being charged for requests that did nothing. So it's very easy to say, oh, these variability doesn't have bad effects, but it has observable effects, and it's easy to spot them. I think the true answer is it's hard. These documents are targeted towards protocol designers and implementers. It should be trivial for an engineer with some knowledge to be able to say something's broken and figure out why, or read a log for sure. But those higher level systematic issues can kind of be naughty. I think this bug has been there for a long time, and I only fluked upon it while I was trying to figure out something else that I'd been seeing that was weird. Yeah,
I think the one thing we can say is if you do greasing, you should also try to do some kind of measurements, and you should be prepared to stop greasing if you actually figure out a strong issue or whatever, because that's usually a point of time where you kind of go back and talk to the other implementer or whatever, and at that point you maybe want to stop greasing. So the main point is really about you don't enable just greasing and don't care about it anymore. Just try to measure it as well.
I mean,
I guess
we've got MapRG chair here and the IPPM chair. Is there maybe any documents that I think performance measurement is different, but from MapRG, maybe is there anything we could lean on from that group, Miriam?
We don't have any documents. Right. No, honestly,
there was a cool presentation.
Yes. Not that I'm aware of. And I mean, I know it's like I don't know how useful it's to say that you should measure something, right? But I think it's still useful to say it.
Right. Something I was going to say earlier to Lucas's point, but I forget it now. So
sorry. I think there's stuff we can say, but the measurements are very domain specific. Like I could not write text that is going to be suitable for how to measure the effectiveness of screwing around with BGP stuff, and maybe like with a lot of these things, the potential impact of the things you're trying affects the amount of risk you might be willing to take to do them. And that's a trade-off to the benefits that you foresee.
Yeah. I remember. So
but that in itself is also a good point, right? To say that, like, when you do greasing, you have to figure out what the risks and what the benefits are.
Right. And Mirio, to your point of if you are hitting a problem, do you stop? I think like that reminds me of like then you end up like in some heuristic world also where it's like, oh, greasing when I'm on, greasing this particular thing on this network always leads to failures, and therefore I should remember, or at least while I'm on this network, not do it, but in other cases I can do it, or when I'm greasing to this particular endpoint, I don't do it. And like this reminds me of like some of the stuff we've done to fix like TFO brokenness of just like, you just have a heuristic where you learn not to do the thing, or you try to learn. It's like, quick doesn't work on this network, so fail over faster. Which is like also kind of similar to happy eyeballs. And then like you get into this complaint of like, okay, if you're hiding the behavior because you have a heuristic to work around the failure, there's no incentive for people to fix or change.
Yes, I think we had part of this discussion already, but the comment I was, and like I don't know what the right answer is, but the comment I was trying to make this time was, if you stop greasing, I think you should also take some action to fix it. Hopefully, but I think the more important point is that if you deploy greasing, I think you should also have a way to undeploy it or to stop it, because it might lead to situations that you didn't expect or whatever. Like if in which situation it is the right thing to not grease anymore or stop at some point, I don't know, but I think you should be prepared to do it if needed.
I mean, in some ways, some of the stuff we're discussing is not about greasing, like strictly. It's just about how do you do new stuff. so how do you roll out a new feature? The greasing is intended to keep implementations honest. I mean, as one way to say it, and kind of benign feature updates, say. But do any of the existing documents specifically talk about methodologies or ways to roll out change? Because it feels like some of what we're discussing is that to me. I'm just pulling up RFC 9413 to remind myself.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I have to more think about it, but I think this is slightly different, because if you roll out a feature, something goes wrong, you have to roll it back. But if you do greasing and something goes wrong, that's kind of the intended purpose, right? And that's a little bit a different question what to do then.
No, what you do is you roll it back.
It depends what you're using it on, right? Because like you could do like greasing on probes too, versus greasing on useful connections.
Yeah, but like what we've had happen in Chrome was we turn it on, we get some complaints, we turn it off, we tell people we're going to turn it back on next month, so you better be fixed, and then we turn it on. But in some cases they tell us no because they're terrible, and so on, and the saga continues.
Right.
But yeah, if it breaks things that are useful, then sometimes you don't have a choice, even if that was the goal.
Yeah. And this gets in a little bit into the discussion we had, like, early on with the whole greasing topic. And I think, Miria had brought up, like, do you do greasing / variability on new protocols, or like, is it called something different? Like, I do think it has a different dynamic on a brand new protocol, since there has been less time for ossification. So it's like, it's something where whatever you get right from the beginning as far as what you make variable and greased, you don't have like the rollback problem. It's just like your entire new protocol was the rollback problem.
I think just speaking to like my own experiences, there could be more greasing or variability we could add now in hindsight, or whatever. But that would now compete for features that our product folks would like us to develop. Is greasing a feature that I could sell to customers? Probably not. But what it does is help ensure a healthy ecosystem that could improve the deployability of future protocol features that we do want. So on its own, it's maybe sounds not of interest. And for that sector of people, it's on the engineers to be able to express sometimes the importance of that.
Right.
The things.
But like take the post-quantum stuff. Like I feel like we've known for a very long time that post-quantum will have bigger handshakes. And like even before you want to do an actual experiment with using the algorithms, everyone knew that it was going to be bigger. So like that is something where like you could sell. It's like, hey, you want this feature in the future. We're not ready to deliver it to you, but because we know you want it in the future, we'll deliver like the readiness for it, which is the variability or the greasing in the ways that we'll need it. I mean, it's kind of similar to like ECH greasing, where it's like we, trying to like pave the way even before we do it.
Yeah, the important bit is it depends who you're talking to, because if you're talking to customers, they don't care about the future. They want it working today. And, an epsilon of brokenness today is much worse than, elephants and puppies in the future, because no one cares that long. And so, like, it's really a long-term thing that you can do when you're an established platform, when you just do it unilaterally, and you can't sell it to anyone else otherwise.
I could give you a different example of this, which I discussed before relating to H2 rapid reset. We were seeing attacks on our systems and trying to come up with various ways to mitigate that. Before we got to the resolution of maybe what the root cause was for our systems. It wasn't just the protocol behavior, it was the impact of the protocol on other things and whatever. But one of the things we explored was dropping stream concurrency limits. And the people who were suggesting that, it's obvious, we think this could be related to the amount of work we're doing. There's this protocol feature that can control concurrency, which is directly related to the amount of work. Let's drop it from what it is to a lower value. Surely that will be fine. The panic is, I don't know what effect this would have. And when the response was, "What do you mean? Why don't you know? Surely it's obvious from the spec." But my stories of protocol debugging are this could go sideways in a lot of ways that are hard to articulate to other people. And in the end, we did reduce it, and we did see interop issues with Chrome and other user agents because of things that they had decided to do, which are perfectly fine. But this came kind of back to the observability thing. The feedback mechanism when a web page fails to load completely is, maybe closing the connection and then that's done. Like the interaction between the endpoints is done. The closed codes are not necessarily there for good reasons. It was, you could say, well, we should put variability in the concurrency limit that we advertise, and we might have spotted this quicker. But we effectively set this value to 100% and didn't notice for a week until the reports came through in such a way that they were well framed to describe specifically the ways that certain web pages were constructed to be broken. And that caused real people a lot of pain. And was sometimes, if we did just say we would change concurrency at random, that would affect performance for people. And again, coming back to the point about product management people, a lot of protocols are designed around improving performance. So risking sacrificing certain people's performance might not be palatable. That's like one of my general concerns for these variability recommendations is the kind of, if you think in terms of nature finding equilibrium, you would kind of rest in the lowest energy state. Anything else is kind of increasing the amount of energy you have to use, and that's not necessarily what people want to do, even if it's the right thing. And yeah, knowing the risks now of changing things like the concurrency limit and the impact that people saw, it could be a harder sell to do other stuff. Or we would know now that we would build some of the better measurement frameworks and roll this out more gradually, as we discussed already. So it's just another anecdote.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't it the case that like before you tried to change the limit, you just didn't know what would happen? While if you would have greased it, you would have known that it didn't work at that point of time.
I think for the amount of traffic that we get, like the feedback mechanism for a web page failed to load, like web pages failed to load for about 1,000 different reasons. And if you're an end user, who are you going to report that to? The website operator, who maybe they have their own telemetry, maybe they don't. Ultimately, to get to the people, like the engineers, is a very long path. Even if we were watching ourselves, for we're an infrastructure provider to millions of websites that all behave differently. There's one bug manifested for certain type of website, but the incident
you're
rate
saying
could
you
be
only
so low.
detected it because you had it running for a week and then got like enough reports, and if you would grease it occasionally, you would have not detected any problems. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, some of these things are so intermittent. Like if you do a reload, it goes away, and then nobody can be bothered filing a bug ticket. Like a human isn't going to want to waste their time on things. Maybe other people on the call can speak to, their automated systems for bug reporting and how effective those are.
I mean, I guess greasing is not the silver bullet anyway, so.
All right. I think good discussion, some good things to add here. I think the whole observability thing is definitely an important section to add, and I'd be happy to help work on that too for text. So we're getting near to the top of the hour. Just wanted to cover some of the just kind of like procedural things. So I guess first, when do we want to chat again? Do we want to have a thing at 1:20? Lucas, are you gonna be there? Because when we have the in-person meetings, we get more commentators and spectators, so we can plan for that, and that's good.
I have not confirmed travel plans, but I would like. I think another meeting would be good. I would like to make actual more major contribution to the document. The last thing we did was just editorial. I think it would be great to get towards closing out at least half of these issues, if not like all of them, or at least making progress so there's discussion. And then to be able to give people ample time to review that next draft. So not publishing it 2 weeks before the meeting, but in a month's time, for instance, so that maybe we would have more time. I want to be ambitious with my target, especially before I go away on summer holiday. So I don't think an interim meeting is strictly necessary.
No.
But yeah, in person would be good.
Okay. Should we plan for doing something in Vancouver then?
Yep, because I don't know if I'll be there in person for guaranteed, but I can dial in if
yeah. Okay, good. We'll plan for that. And then just like the aspect of like, do we want to have this be actually like an adopted IAB stream thing? Doesn't technically matter. Like, I mean, we can do it later also. I mean, generally that would just be like.
actual rules for the IB stream are? Like, there's no real concept of adoption, right? The IB is going to vote on it before publication if it's on the IAB stream.
Well, no, there is a process of just saying like this is something that the IB is considering putting on the stream, and then like it goes just like a notice goes to the community and they can provide feedback.
Exactly. So I
Maria?
think this is the question when we think the document is ready for a first round of community feedback. It sounded like Lucas wanted to do at least one more update before that.
Right.
Yeah,
So like,
sounds
we
reasonable to
we
me.
could wait for more updates and try to get it mature, but like there will be also like another like community feedback period when like the program and the IBs thinks it's done. So those like it doesn't make sense for them to be like right back to back. We don't want to wait until like we finish the document, now let's adopt it and then finalize it.
Yeah, but I also have to say we usually get more feedback during this first round when people see a new document.
Fair enough.
So having it in a reasonable shape is probably a good idea.
Okay. Yeah. And just for the states there, essentially it would become a candidate IAB document while we get the feedback, and then it would move into active IAB document. And then eventually it goes into community review, IAB review, and then approved after that. So that is the state machine. Okay. So aim to actually update stuff like a month before 120, publish that, have a meeting at 120, maybe like at 120 or around then do the community review and like the candidate for adoption, and then move it into active IB document after that. Okay. And then Lucas, did you want to kind of reach out again to Dave and just say, okay, cool. Feel free to CC me and David on that too.
Yeah, I'll send an email out after this meeting before I forget.
Awesome. Great. We've taken up most of the hour. Anything else? Or should we tell people on Zulip that they can go change Zulip?
I think we can call it. Good seeing everyone.
All right. Cool. All right, I'll let Robert know. Awesome. Bye-bye. Have a good night, Europe people.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.